So really my addiction started when I had turned 15 and I started to rebel from my parents. And I started sneaking out of the house and, doing all the curious things that a teenager does and experiencing what it was like to drink and smoke marijuana and really just trying to live carelessly, considering the fact that I really wasn't allowed to do many things. Unfortunately, I did pay the price for some of my actions. When I was 15, I snuck out of the house one night and I went to a party. I unfortunately had blacked out and I had asked somebody for a ride home, and I woke up the next morning in a house and in a bed naked by myself. I was already scared to death because I hadn't made it home. So with that being said, I didn't tell anybody. I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want my parents to be mad at me. They were already discouraged enough because I wasn't home. They were worried. So I just pretended like nothing had ever happened. I think it was about 5 months later, I had gone to the family planning to get on birth control because I knew that some of my choices that I was making, I should probably, invest in some proper precautions. And I was found out that I was 5 months pregnant. Although I could have gotten an abortion, not only would it have killed the baby, but it also would have endangered my life as well. So I chose to go ahead and go through with the pregnancy. I really wasn't ready to be a teenage parent. I was in 9th grade. I lost all of my friends. I grew up with a great group of friends playing softball, soccer, basketball. I was the EWJRA champion for cow riding. I had a lot of things going for me. And so when I had lost all of my friends, it really led me to a deep, dark depression. And, thank God that I had my parents to support me. And my mom really did take on a lot of the responsibilities of raising my son so I could continue to go to school. My senior year in high school, I was 17, and I really started hanging out with the wrong crowd of people. And I was smoking a lot of marijuana, drinking a lot, really being careless and not being the parent that I should have been for my son, and really taking my parents for granted. And that was when I was introduced to crank. Crank then became my drug of choice. It was always something that I went to because I could go and get things done. And really, it was a coping mechanism for me to, hide all those feelings that I was feeling inside because I wasn't hanging out with the group of kids that I was hanging out with before. And so when I had started doing crank, I started really losing the responsibility of my schoolwork. I was restricted to bed rest when I was pregnant with my son. And I had to have a homeschool teacher come in, and I would turn all my work into them. So when I was a senior, I did all my senior pictures. My cap and gown was ordered, my graduation invitations. And 2 weeks before graduation, I found out that I wasn't going to graduate because they had lost my transcripts from homeschool. I felt very defeated. Especially in the fact that our principal at that time didn't even allow me to be in the gym to even watch my class practice to graduate. So here I was, a second-year senior, taking 9th grade classes, and it made it to where I really wasn't as involved as what I should have been. I was living so carelessly that it didn't even matter if I graduated. I did. I graduated in 1997, and actually turned out to be the best school year that I had ever had. I graduated with a 3.64 GPA. So that was really good and it was uplifting. Shortly after I graduated, I moved out of my parents' house. I took my son with me and I really wasn't doing much better. I started to steal from stores and I started manipulating people to get what I wanted. And even if it meant getting into a physical altercation, that's something that I was willing to do at that point. I really didn't have a lot of things going for me as far as my, education-wise or even job skills. I was a waitress at Pizza Hut, but really just flying by the seat of my pants. It took me 3 years to find my son's father. I had 5 boys DNA tested at the age of 16 when I had my son a month after my birthday. And when I finally did find out who his dad was, it wasn't because of a coincidence or anything like that. He had actually lived in Spokane and came back over here to play on a co-ed softball team. And he had mentioned my name to one of my relatives, and they had mentioned it to me and my parents. And we kind of put everything all together and decided to have him DNA tested, and come to find out it was 99.99%. And at that point, I was 18 years old. So going back, I was 15 and he was 25. So the statute of limitations had already been up for me to be able to press any statutory rape charges or anything of that such. So really what I wanted to do was just be able to give my son the opportunity to know who his dad was. So I left that door open. My son spent a little bit of time with his dad, and I think it was when, I'd say he was about 6 years old. I remember him calling me from his dad's house, and he was just crying hysterically, telling me that, his dad had told him that if he wasn't so fat, he'd be able to keep up with him, running across the softball field because they were late for a softball game. So at that point, I told myself, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to drop everything and I'm going to drive to Spokane and I'm going to pick up my son. And I always strive to be the best parent that I possibly could for him. But my addiction also had, its grips on me as well. So I would say, it wasn't until I had met my present boyfriend that I have now. I was 25, I believe, when him and I met. And I had totally just fallen in love with him. But he had no idea that I was addicted to, meth. Because by the time the crank had ended, meth had become my drug of choice. I couldn't function without it. I needed to make sure that I was a functionable addict because I didn't want anything to present itself to show that I was addicted. So I was a very low-key user. There weren't very many people who knew that I used meth. And he certainly was one of those people, including my family, that I didn't want to know anything. So I would say March of 2001, my oldest son and I were in a really bad car wreck. I had an elderly man who was driving a rental car turn in front of me, and I hit him going 60. And I tried so hard to throw my arms over my son to make sure that he was going to be okay. And unfortunately, when I had woken up, I was actually in the ditch. And that was because I had gotten out of the car after I had gotten my knees out of the dash. My front teeth were broken off. My chin was split. My eyelid was split. But my most important thing was trying to help my son. And the adrenaline had hit me so hard that I had just passed out in the ditch. When I had woken up, he was still in the car, strapped in a seatbelt, he was 8, and I thought, okay, well, he doesn't appear to be injured, so, it's going to be okay. I can remember the ambulance ride all the way to the hospital, and my son screaming and crying, asking me, Mom, why'd you do that? Why'd you hit him? And I can remember telling the EMTs, please tell him that it wasn't my fault, and that somebody pulled out in front of me, and I had no time to stop, And so they get us to the hospital, and they take care of me. My son's on the other side, and he's still crying. And I can visualize it today. The scared feeling that I had that there was something wrong with my son. Coming to find out, he had a lacerated spleen, he had a perforated valve, and he had a small hole in his small intestines, in which had opened up, and he had to have 19 and a half inches of his small intestines removed. We spent 21 days in the hospital with my son in the ICU. And I think that's when my meth addiction really grabbed a hold of me, because there wasn't an ounce or a minute of time that I was willing to sleep, because I wanted to be there for my son at the hospital. I slept in a chair, sitting up the whole time for 21 days, in hopes that my son was going to turn out okay and that he was going to be able to recover from this. So finally, on the 21st day, actually probably the 19th day, he finally was getting up out of his bed. He was a heavier set child, so they had stapled his stomach shut, probably from his sternum all the way down to his groin area. And I can remember when he first got out of bed, his staples had split apart in his belly button. And I knew at that point that, we still had a very long road ahead of us, but I had to make sure that I maintained the capabilities to be there for him. And if that meant that I needed to get high 24/7, then that's what I was going to do. Unfortunately, when he was released from the hospital, we were supposed to have hospice come in and have them put multi-dex glue in his belly button and then pack it with gauze. And he did not want anybody else to do that for him. So then I decided that I was going to start taking some nursing classes so I could nurse my son back to health and get things back as normal as they possibly could. And I decided to reach out to his father, and just let him know, hey, this is what has happened, and it would really be nice if you could be here for our son. And he came one day. And, even that wasn't enough for him to really be a part of our son's life. So I still pushed forward, and I took those classes, and I did everything I needed to do for my son to get everything back to normal and still be able to be a functional addict. But I could feel myself really losing control. But there was something in me that kept me going and low key enough to where my boyfriend and my family really didn't have to know what was going on inside of me, and that I was struggling in the grips of my addiction. Eventually, I had one drug dealer who I connected with and that I was really good friends with, who had put me in a few situations that unfortunately led me to getting in trouble with the law. I got arrested for third-degree assault because I became a very aggressive person with all my anger that I had built up inside. And to add on the addiction part of that, I went to jail for assault, and I went to jail for third-degree theft because that was the way that I fed my addiction. I wasn't working at the time, so I knew I had to take things into my own hands to be able to feed that addiction. Unfortunately, going to jail and getting out the next day and having to pay a fine didn't stop my addiction. It just led for me to do more and more, because jail wasn't no big deal. You know, they're gonna arrest me and they're gonna let me out the next day. No problem, I can deal with that. So I would say, you know, when I turned 35 is when I really started getting in trouble with the law. I had then got arrested for 3 counts of identity theft. I had stolen a lady's purse, and I used her debit card at a convenience store, and I signed her name. And I went back to jail, and I got PR'd the next day because they didn't consider my past charges enough to hold me. So getting PR'd out of jail just meant that gave me the opportunity to continue what I was doing. And ultimately it led me to become even more aggressive. And eventually I went back to jail for second-degree assault. I had smashed a girl's face into the slot machine at the casino 2 or 3 times, and I knew I was going to jail. And I think about it now and realize that that's exactly what needed to happen for me to realize what I wanted to do with my life. That day when I went to jail, I spent 4 months in Okanagan County Jail. I can remember laying on my top bunk, asking my Creator for forgiveness and to help guide me down the right path, and to please help me, because now I am able and I'm willing to finally admit that I had a problem with drugs. My life came crashing down on me. My boyfriend knew, now that everything had all came out, what I had done and what I had been doing for the last 17 and a half years of my life. I came to grips with what I needed to do to change. And I think really what got me was when my boyfriend brought our kids to see me when I was in jail. And I can't even begin to tell you how horrible I felt not being able to touch my children, only talking to them through a plastic glass. They picked me a rose, and I watched them, pluck off every single petal and throw it on the floor because they couldn't give it to me. And I told him, my boyfriend, I said, you can't bring them here anymore. I don't want them to see me like this. I want them to see me as their mom, their beautiful mom who wants to see them do good in life and wants them to see me be successful. So a lady by the names of Nancy Barnes, she was from Okanagan County Behavioral Health Care, came to the jail 4 months later to see me, and I was able to admit to her that I had a problem with drugs and I needed help. And she offered me drug court, in which she explained everything that entailed what it was that I needed to do to be a part of this 2-year program. And I was willing to let my guard down and take on this program. So I was released from jail, and unfortunately, I had to move into the Shove House, which is a sober living environment. It gave me structure, it gave me a foundation, but on the flip side of that, I had never been away from my kids before. And so it was really hard for me to get released and not be able to go home to my family. So I stayed there for a couple of weeks, and then I left for treatment at the center in Wenatchee. And really it took me about 2 weeks to grasp the concept of what choice theory was. And I almost didn't make it. I really contemplated about, just getting up and leaving. And then I thought of my kids. I thought of my parents. I thought of my brother. I thought of my significant other and knew that that wasn't an option for me. I really needed to just buckle down and really understand what choice theory was all about and how your brain works when you get into recovery. So I embraced that. I made it the 28 days. And when I got out, I got to go back home. First thing we had to do was we had to do a drug dog search, because when you enter the drug court program, by law, they can go in and they can search your home and make sure that there's no paraphernalia or anything of that such in the home. So we went through all of that, and I was able to move back in with my kids and their dad. And, that was really one of the happiest days of my life. But coming from a small town that I live in, I've been here since I was 5 years old. And I knew that the community had seen me in the newspaper. They knew who I was. I was, a waitress for many years. And I was really scared to get out into the community and face all of those people who I felt that I had let down. But I knew that being in the drug court program, there was a lot of expectations that I had to do. So, I embraced what drug court was all about. I went to MRT. I was in intensive outpatient. I was in a healthy relationships class. And I also became the president of the Life After group for when folks do graduate from drug court. So when my 2 years was up and I graduated from drug court, it was amazing to be able to have the judges in Okanagan County and all the people from OBHC and my family there to support me and see all of my successes. And I knew at this point that I had made the right choice to get into recovery. I've attended numerous 12-step meetings, and really it was a saving grace, because I was able to go into these rooms and share my story, share my struggles with people who were just like me. And it was a place where I could fit in. And to be able to share that experience, strength, and hope with people, and to know that you're making a change for recovery and making that recovery the epidemic is really what I want to be able to do moving forward. Sharing my story means so much to me. And, once I graduated drug court and stuff, I decided to continue my nursing, and I became a certified HCA, which is a home care assistant. I had taken care of an elderly couple who became a significant part of my life, and I was with them until their last days. And it meant everything to me to be able to see somebody smile and to know that you're giving somebody a good quality of life. Truly does mean everything, especially when you're in recovery and you know that you're making a difference in somebody's life. It's huge. So then after that, I really had this passion inside of me that really wanted to give back to the community, especially for recovery, with what had been given to me so freely from numerous old timers at 12-step meetings. Like, you could really make a difference to the recovery community. So I had spoke with one of my girlfriends who I currently work with, Lindsay Cox. She actually told me that there was a job posted for the opioid treatment network at Family Health Centers. and I applied for it, and I now work at Family Health Centers for the Opioid Treatment Network, and I am the SUD recovery coach, and I'm also the new supported employment specialist, which is really big to me because individuals who have a lot of justice involvement or even mental health issues, they struggle every single day being able to get back into being a productive member of society, and being able to know that there are people out there who are willing to give you a second chance at life and help you build that foundation and that structure you need to further yourself in your recovery. And I'm super blessed to be one of those people and to help individuals, get jobs, get housing, and really just be able to walk side by side next to people. Really does mean everything to me. My biggest supporter, though, I would say is Tatum, who is my significant other. He has been there for me since day one. He's never given up on me, and he's, always told me, don't give up on yourself, because I'm not going to give up on you, and the kids aren't going to give up on you, and we love you. And we want to see you succeed, and we're going to be there with you every step of the way. So I really do have him to thank as my rock and my supporter through everything that I've been through, because he could have easily walked away from me and raised our children by himself. But he chose not to do that because he could see the potential in me. So I feel super blessed that I've been able to be a part of so many people's lives and support them and love them as people have done for me. So I will have 8 years sober March 7th of this year. And I'm just super excited that I've been blessed enough to make it as far as I have. And I just want people to know, never give up on your hopes or on your dreams, because you can make the impossible possible. My best advice that I could give somebody who is in active addiction right now is to really think about what you know that you can be and what you want to be, and know that there are people out there who are willing to help you and that have the resources that can guide you down that path. I actually had a girlfriend who had came over just before you had gotten here, and unfortunately she's in active addiction, and she's getting ready to leave for treatment, finally. And I had told her, I said, this is really a blessing in disguise. You may not feel it right now, but just know that I'll be praying for you, that this will be the last time that you have to go to treatment, and that you figure out that you are worth it and that you can make the impossible possible. So I think that, for people out there who don't know a lot about addiction or mental health issues, it's not because people that are addicts or that have these issues, it's not because there's something wrong with them, and it's not because they're a bad person. It really does stem from some type of a trauma that they've gone through, or maybe they didn't have that parental guidance, they didn't have that great childhood growing up. And really, people really do need to know that just because somebody is in active addiction or who have mental health issues really do need the support of others who really don't know a lot about addiction. It's really hard to explain things to individuals who really don't know what it's like to be an addict or to have mental health issues. My parents being a prime example. They grew up in a very religious family. They went to church all the time, and neither one of them really knew anything about drugs or about any other kind of addiction, let alone any mental health issues. So when I went through all of my struggles, I can remember my dad asking, well, why didn't you just quit? How come you couldn't just do that and just walk away? And it's a lot easier said than done. Once you start using substances and it takes over your whole mind, body, and soul, it really is that little thing in the back of your brain that feeds you and tells you, that you're always going to be an addict and that you have to have these substances in order to continue living. And maybe you're just thinking that that's just the way that life is supposed to be for you. But it really isn't. There are ways, there are resources out there to help people who have struggles with addiction and mental health issues, because they really do both go hand in hand. And I know that right now, more than ever, that people who do struggle with these, they need our help in the recovery community more than ever. So I think that once we break through that stigma of addiction and, all the labels that are put on addicts or even people with mental health, being able to work together as a society to really build that rapport with individuals to help them be more successful and just lend that helping hand. The stigma is the biggest thing, to be truly honest. I think once that we're able to break through and have people realize that it's not the stigma that's behind addiction, it really does base itself on, the struggles that people go through in life, and these are their coping mechanisms that they've become accustomed to, and to hide all their pain and all their suffering that they've gone through, and really educating people about, what addiction really is and how we can help stop the opioid epidemic and really making that recovery the true epidemic. So I think what I would say as far as what I really want people to know is that you may look at somebody and you may think that everything is okay with them and they put that smile on their face and they're carrying themselves like a regular productive member of society. But really, stop and be kind to people and just know that we all deserve to live a healthy, happy life, and that if we can all work together, we can really put a stop to the addiction that it has gone so rampant, even in this whole United States. It's everywhere. And especially with the youth, I really think that it's important for the youth to really know what addiction is all about and the struggles that kids face in their teenage years when it comes to going out and making, those poor choices and really the path that it could lead them down. So if we're able to reach out to the youth and really educate them on making positive choices and being productive and staying involved with school and their sports, they're less likely to fall into that addiction. My daughter is a prime person for this topic because she's dealing with her first death of a friend who was 15 that just died in a car wreck last weekend. She had went to a party and unfortunately was not wearing her seatbelt, and the truck wrecked and she was ejected and the truck landed on top of her and she was dead at the scene. So For her, this has been something really hard for her to wrap her head around. She doesn't understand how it happened or what happened or, just the whole reasoning behind it. And that's why I stress to her, like, now you know why your dad and I are so highly involved in you kids' lives, because we want to help form your future and help lead you down that right path and keep you involved with your education and have expectations of you to know that you can be successful, as you grow and you get older. And really just being open-minded and having that open, honest relationship, especially with your teenage kids. I didn't have that with my parents. With my parents being so naive, I didn't know anything about sex or drugs or alcohol. Those are all things that I experienced on my own. Unfortunately, there were choices that I made that I paid the price for. But I can tell you today, though, that my addiction and everything that has happened to me in my life has made me into the woman that I am today. My oldest son, he has his wife, and I've got 2 beautiful grandbabies. I have a grandson and a granddaughter, and it's so beautiful to see these kids grow up and know that they have a future ahead of them, and that mom never gave up, and I refuse to give up, and I'm gonna continue being the best mom, the best daughter, the best sister, the best friend that I could ever, and to my peers. Just sharing all of my experiences with everybody that I know means everything to me, because I know who I am now. I know who I've always wanted to be, and now I can showcase that. I can bring it to life, and I can, keep moving forward.